For generations, the starter home was it. It was that first rung on the ladder to the American dream. But lately, it feels like that first rung has just vanished. Today, we're gonna figure out why. So let's jump right in. Okay, first let's just look at the numbers because honestly, they're staggering. If you go back to the 1980s, a full 40% of all new homes being built were considered entry-level. 40%. And today, well, that number has absolutely plummeted to just 9%. That's not a slow decline, folks. That's a nosedive. And at the exact same time, we've been hit with this massive affordability crisis. Just since 2020, just a few years ago, home prices across the country have shot up by over 52%. Just think about that for a second. A home that was, say, 300 grand is now pushing $500,000. It's an unbelievable surge. And as if that wasn't enough of a gut punch, the cost to even borrow money has soared. Mortgage rates are hanging out around 7%. Now, that might not sound like a huge number on its own, but trust me, it can add hundreds, sometimes even $1,000 to your monthly payment compared to just a few years back. So these numbers are painting a pretty grim picture, right? Let's dig a little deeper into the evidence and really define what it is we've lost. First off, what even is a starter home? It's not one specific size or one specific price tag. It's basically the most affordable, most modest home you can find in any given area. It could be 100 grand in one state or 400 grand in another. The key idea is that it's supposed to be that accessible first step. Now, this is where it gets really wild. Look at the sheer scale of this production collapse. Back in the 80s, we were building close to 500,000 of these homes every single year. But over the last decade, we've been building fewer than 100,000 a year. The supply line has basically been squeezed shut. Which brings us to the big mystery we're trying to solve here today. If the demand is obviously there, why on earth aren't builders building them? Where did they all go? But before we get to the causes, let's talk about the consequences. Who is really feeling the pain from this disappearing act? Well, the answer is pretty clear. It's the first-time buyers. And this right here just perfectly illustrates the delay of the American dream. In 1981, your typical first-time homebuyer was 29 years old. Today, that age has jumped all the way to 38. We are talking about nearly a decade-long delay in one of the biggest milestones in a person's life. And really, it's no wonder why. Today's buyers are staring down a perfect storm of financial headwinds. You've got student loans, car payments, credit card debt, and on top of it all, rent is just going through the roof. Trying to save up for a down payment feels like trying to hit a moving target. And all of that leads us to this fundamental paradox in the housing market today. You have the most demand, the biggest pool of buyers, all looking for homes at the affordable, entry-level end of the spectrum, but that is exactly where you find the least amount of supply. It's a total mismatch. Okay, so this brings us right to the heart of our investigation. Why is this happening? To get to the bottom of it, let's start by rounding up the usual suspects. Now look, builders definitely face some real challenges. There's no doubt about it. The cost of land has skyrocketed, there's a serious shortage of skilled labor, and building materials are way more expensive than they used to be. These are all big hurdles for any kind of construction. But because while all those challenges are real, they affect all kinds of building, from luxury mansions to starter homes. So are they really the full picture? Or is there a bigger, more specific reason that starter homes, in particular, have all but vanished? And that, my friends, brings us to the real heart of the issue. The evidence, when you really look at it, points overwhelmingly to one primary culprit: a massive, tangled web of rules that's creating a huge bottleneck. And hey, don't just take my word for it. When you actually ask the experts in the field what the single biggest roadblock is, this is what they say. It's not the cost of wood, it's not a lack of workers, it's the rules of the game. It's zoning. So what exactly are zoning laws? Well, to put it simply, they're the local rulebook that carves up our towns and cities. They're the rules that say, nope, you can only build a big single-family home here, or this lot has to be at least half an acre. They control everything. And here's exactly how they kill the starter home. A lot of these laws straight up prevent building more affordable housing types, like townhouses or small condos. They mandate these huge, expensive lots. They make it easy for local opposition groups to shut down new projects. And the result? The cost to even get a project approved becomes so insanely high that the only way for a builder to make a profit is to build a giant, expensive luxury home. And let's just put a number on that cost. Are you ready for this?
According to some analyses, all those regulations, from zoning to permits to fees, can account for a staggering 25% of a new home's final price tag. A quarter of the cost is just red tape.
So yeah, the problem feels pretty daunting. But the good news is, once you identify the main cause, you can start pointing towards solutions. So what are the paths forward? How do we find a way home? Well, communities are starting to get creative. The most direct solution, of course, is to reform those restrictive zoning codes and just allow for more types of housing. Others are encouraging things like accessory dwelling units, like backyard cottages or apartments over the garage. Some are even looking at converting old office buildings or malls into new homes. So this is so important, and it's our first big takeaway. This crisis is not some unsolvable mystery or an act of God. It is largely a policy problem that we created, and that means it has a policy solution. The single most powerful tool we have to increase the supply of starter homes is to change the local rules that are preventing them from being built in the first place.
And our second takeaway is for anyone who's actually in the market right now. Look, the reality is tough, which means you have to get creative. This might mean looking at neighborhoods a little further out, or digging into the thousands of down payment assistance programs out there. And honestly, it means mentally preparing for this journey to just take longer than it did for your parents. And that leaves us with one final question to chew on. Because this isn't just about economics, right? It's about the kind of communities we want to live in. So if we could just wipe the slate clean and redesign our local housing rules from scratch for today's world, what would a future with enough homes for everyone actually look like?